When a shy 10-year-old boy picked up his tiny violin in the middle of a crowded street, no one expected that a single note from his bow would silence the world and change it forever. It was a normal busy afternoon in the middle of the city. People were walking fast, looking at their phones, going to work, shopping, or meeting someone. Cars were honking, buses were passing by, and the usual noise of the city filled the air. Among all this, no one noticed a small boy walking slowly across the stone pavement with an old violin case in his hand. He was wearing simple clothes, slightly loose trousers, and a faded blue hoodie. His shoes were old, a little dirty, and his hair was messy. He looked like any ordinary kid, but there was something quiet and focused in his eyes. The boy, whose name was Eli, walked to a corner of the square where people sometimes sat to eat or rest. There, he placed a small wooden stool and sat down. He carefully opened the violin case. It was a very old case, with scratches and torn edges. Inside, the violin also looked old, but Eli handled it like a treasure. He took it out slowly, cleaned it with a soft cloth, and tightened the bow with complete care, just like a professional. A few people walked by. Some glanced at him for a second and moved on. One man dropped a few coins in the open violin case. Thinking he would hear a common tune played by a kid, no one expected anything unusual. After all, how much could a 10-year-old play? Eli looked around once, took a deep breath, and placed the violin on his shoulder. He closed his eyes for a second. His fingers went into position, and then he started to play. It wasn't a simple song. It wasn't a nursery rhyme or a slow melody. It was something that most people in the world had never even heard live. It was Paganini's Caprice, No. 24, a piece so difficult that even professional violinists struggled to perform it. It was a storm of notes full of speed, emotion, and technique. This 10-year-old was playing it not just trying, but actually playing it with confidence and emotion. The first few seconds passed, and people near him stopped. One woman who was checking her phone froze in place. A man eating a sandwich turned his head and dropped his food. A little girl walking with her mother pointed and said, "Mom, look." The sound coming from the violin didn't match the boy's age or appearance. It was like hearing a master playing in a concert hall, not a kid sitting alone in the street. More people started to stop. The crowd began to grow. First 10 people, then 20, then 50. It was like a magnet. Every note pulled more and more people toward him. Some started recording him on their phones. Others just stood in silence, not believing what they were seeing and hearing. Eli's face was calm. His fingers moved like lightning, but his expression was full of focus. It wasn't just about playing fast. He was telling a story through the violin. He leaned forward slightly with each phrase, then pulled back when the melody got softer. His body moved with the music like a dancer. He wasn't just copying the piece, he was living it. There was no background track, no microphone, nothing fancy. Just one boy, one violin, and a piece of music that seemed impossible for someone his age. The sound echoed through the square, clear and powerful, and people couldn't believe what they were witnessing. A young woman in the crowd whispered to her friend, "This has to be a prank. He can't really be playing that." But another man who had studied music in college shook his head and said, "No, this is real. This is beyond incredible." Eli didn't look up, but he didn't care who was watching. He wasn't doing it for money or attention. He was playing because he loved it. Every note was coming from his heart. Even when a dog barked in the distance or a police siren went by, he didn't lose focus. His hands never slowed. His bow moved faster and faster as the piece reached its most difficult part, where even experienced musicians often make mistakes. But Eli didn't stop. His hands didn't shake. The intensity in his playing grew stronger. People watching started to hold their breath. Some even had tears in their eyes. They were watching something unforgettable. An elderly man who had once played in an orchestra wiped his eyes and said softly, "I thought I'd never hear Paganini like this again, and from a child. Unbelievable." By now, there were at least 100 people around Eli. Some were standing on benches just to get a better view. Others were live streaming him online. Nobody moved. Everyone was frozen in that moment. The last section of the piece came, which included a dramatic series of fast jumps and finger tricks that seemed impossible. Eli's fingers danced on the strings like they were flying. The bow moved with a fiery energy, and finally, after the last high note faded into the air, Eli pulled the bow across one final time and then lowered the violin slowly. There was complete silence for a few seconds. No one said anything. And then, as if the whole square woke up at once, people began clapping loud, emotional clapping. Some cheered, others shouted bravo and unbelievable. The applause didn't stop for a long time. Eli looked up finally, a little surprised. He gave a small, shy smile and nodded. His cheeks turned a little red, but he didn't speak. He just placed his violin gently back in the case, like someone putting away a precious jewel. One young man came forward and asked, "Hey kid, where did you learn to play like that?" Eli just smiled again and whispered, "At home." Another woman tried to talk to him, but Eli shook his head politely and stood up. He picked up his case and began to walk away slowly, leaving behind a square full of stunned and amazed people. Some followed him. Others just stood there, still processing what they had witnessed. The people who saw him that day would never forget it, and none of them knew that this was just the beginning. The sound of clapping still echoed through the city square, even as the boy Eli walked away with his old violin case in hand. He didn't turn back. He didn't expect more. For him, the music was enough. He had come, played the piece he had, practiced for months, and left quietly like a shadow. But behind him, something had changed. That square was no longer just a noisy street corner. It had become a place where something magical had happened, something no one would forget. As Eli disappeared into the crowd, many people remained rooted in place, still stunned by what they had just heard. One man turned to his friend and said, "Was that even real?" Another woman sat down on a nearby bench and looked at the video she had recorded, playing it over and over again, trying to believe that it really happened. The crowd slowly began to talk, whispering, then speaking louder. Some even followed the direction Eli had walked in, hoping to ask him questions, maybe offer help, maybe just say thank you. But Eli was gone. Back in the square, a professional violinist named Clara had been passing by on her way to teach a music class. She was carrying her own expensive violin and sipping coffee when she first heard the notes. At first, she thought someone was playing a speaker. It couldn't be live, not in the street, not with that level of skill. But when she turned the corner and saw the small boy with the simple violin, her heart skipped a beat. She stopped moving, her coffee fell from her hand, and she just stared. She couldn't believe it. She had studied music for over 15 years, played in concerts across the world, and knew exactly how difficult Paganini's Caprice No. 24 wasn't just a piece of music, it was a challenge, a mountain of technique. And this boy barely 10 years old, had climbed that mountain with ease. After Eli left, Clow walked around the square asking people, "Did anyone talk to him? Does anyone know who he is?" Some said they tried, but the boy just smiled and left. Clara looked at the crowd, now buzzing with energy and excitement. A few people had recorded the performance, and they were already uploading the videos to social media. Within an hour, the first video went viral. A man in his 20s had posted the video on a music forum with the title, "Who is this violin? Kid Paganini in public performed by a child." Within 15 minutes, the post had hundreds of comments. Musicians and non-musicians alike were shocked. Some thought it was fake. Others were amazed by how the boy played with so much feeling. One comment read, "I've played for 20 years and I can't touch this level. This is not normal talent, it's genius." The video was shared on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and even Reddit. Hashtags like #ViolinBoy and #PaganiniKid started trending. Famous musicians started to repost it. One even tweeted, "This kid just reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place." By the evening, thousands had seen the video. People started calling it one of the most touching street performances they had ever seen. It wasn't just the notes he played, it was the way he played them. It was passion, sadness, joy, power, and peace, all in one song. It made people feel something deep inside. Back at home, Eli had no idea what was happening. He didn't even own a phone, didn't use the internet much. He had no social media. He was sitting on his bed, carefully wiping his violin with a soft cloth, just like he always did. His mother was in the kitchen cooking dinner. She didn't know that her son's name was already being spoken around the world, somewhere in another city. A young music student named Daniel watched the video and was speechless. He watched the way Eli held the bow, the way his fingers moved on the strings, and he couldn't believe what he saw. He played the same piece last year in his final exam, but this boy played it better, cleaner, faster, and with more heart. Daniel shared the video with his teacher, who then shared it with a conductor. In just a few hours, the video had reached a major music conservatory, where top-level violin teachers watched it in shock. One teacher paused the video and said, "This is not just talent. This is something rare. This is once in a lifetime." Meanwhile, in a small music blog, someone wrote an article titled "The Unknown Violin Prodigy, a Boy Who Silenced a City." The article told the story of how a young boy, dressed in simple clothes, captured the attention of hundreds without saying a word. It included clips from the video and reactions from people who were there. The article ended with a powerful line: "We may not know his name, but the world is already listening." The next day, news channels started contacting people who had been in the square. A local newspaper posted an article with the headline, "10-year-old boy plays violin masterpiece, leaves crowd speechless." Still, no one knew who he was. There were no clues. The only thing people had was the video and the music. In another part of the city, a group of street musicians watched the video and cried. One of them said, "He plays like he's lived 100 years. It's that boy. He's something else." Some people were jealous. A few online users said the video was fake. "There's no way a kid plays like that," one person wrote. But then a famous violinist commented on the post and replied, "It's real. I've seen hundreds of young players. This is the rarest kind of talent. We should celebrate it, not doubt it." Back in Eli's home, his mother had just come back from work when her neighbor knocked on the door. She was holding her phone and said, "Is this your son?" She showed the video. Eli's mother's eyes widened. "Where did you get this?" she asked. The neighbor laughed. "He's all over the internet. Your boy is famous." Eli came out of his room slowly. He had a calm smile on his face. His mother showed him the video. "How? When did this happen?" she asked. Eli shrugged and said softly, "Yesterday." His mother couldn't believe. She didn't know what to feel. Pride, shock, fear, joy, all mixed together. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. He said, "I just wanted to try, see if I was good enough." That night, Eli's life changed. People started messaging. Journalists, musicians, school directors, and even talent scouts. Offers came pouring in. "We'd love to give Eli a scholarship. Can he perform at our event? We'll provide a new violin, lessons, anything he needs." But Eli didn't respond to any of it yet. He sat by the window with his violin, playing soft melodies for himself. For him, music was not about fame. It was about feeling, about finding peace in one part of the city. A music professor was watching the video for the 5th time. He leaned back and said to his colleague, "This is just the beginning.
The world hasn't seen what this boy can really do."
The professor was right. Because even though Eli had no training, no teacher, and no stage, his music had already reached the hearts of millions. This was only the start of a journey that would take him far beyond anything he had imagined. The video of the little boy playing the violin in the street kept spreading faster than anyone expected. Within one day, it had crossed over 1 million views. In just 2 more days, that number became 10 million. People from different countries were sharing it. Some watched it during their lunch breaks. Others showed it to their children before bedtime. It was everywhere, on social media, on news websites, in WhatsApp groups, and even on TV news. The world had suddenly become obsessed with finding out more about the mysterious 10-year-old boy who played one of the hardest violin pieces in public with such beauty and skill. People wanted to know, who is he? Where did he come from? Who taught him? Why was he playing on the street and not on a big stage? But no one had answers yet. A few of the people who had been in the city square that day were interviewed on news channels. They described the moment as magical, one woman said. It felt like time stopped. Everyone just stood there frozen. I've never seen anything like that in my life. Another person, a musician, said, I've been playing violin for 12 years. I still can't play that piece cleanly. He did it like he was breathing. One teenager who had taken a clear video of the entire performance became a minor internet celebrity for being the guy who filmed the violin boy. Reporters came to his house. Music experts from around the world started analyzing the video. They studied Eli's bow grip, his finger placement, his posture, and most importantly, his emotion. That was the thing everyone noticed the most. Eli didn't just play Paganini, he made people feel it. He made a piece full of notes into something that touched the heart. Famous. Violinists reposted the video with captions like, "This boy will lead the next generation of music and a future legend among us." Some couldn't believe it was real. Others believed it was a gift from above. Offers started coming in from all directions. Music schools from New York, London, Paris, Vienna, and Tokyo reached out through emails and social media. They were offering full scholarships, free lessons, free instruments, even places to stay. One message said, "Dear Eli, we would be honored to have you train at our conservatory. We will take care of everything," another said. He deserves the world's best stage. But still, no one knew where to find him. That was when a reporter named Julia decided to go looking for him herself. She worked for a popular magazine and had covered many stories about musicians. She watched the video over and over again. She noticed tiny details, the old violin case, the style of Eli's clothes, and even the small scratch on his bow. She started visiting schools and neighborhoods near the square, asking if anyone had seen the boy. At first, people just shook their heads. But after 3 days, she met someone, a grocery store worker, who said, "I think I've seen that boy before. He comes here sometimes with his mom. She works late shifts, I think." That was the first real lead. Julia followed it carefully, going from street to street, till she found a small building in a quiet part of town. It was an old apartment block. Paint was peeling from the walls, and the stairs creaked under her feet. She went to the second floor and knocked on a door. After a moment, it opened. A tired-looking woman stood there, her eyes wide in surprise. Julia introduced herself and gently asked, "Is your son the one in that violin video?" The woman paused, then called behind her, "Eli, someone's here for you." And then there he was, the boy from the video, standing in a small living room with a violin resting on his lap. He looked calm, almost shy. Julia smiled and said, "You've become a global star, Eli." He blinked in surprise. "I have." That moment was when the truth about Eli's life finally came out. Julia sat with him and his mother for hours. She listened carefully, took notes, and didn't interrupt. What she discovered moved her deeply. Eli had no formal training. He had never been to a music school. His mother couldn't afford private lessons. She worked 2 jobs, one during the day as a cleaner, and one at night in a bakery. Their life wasn't easy. But from the time Eli was 5 years old, he had fallen in love with the sound of the violin. It happened after he saw a street performer. One day, that moment stuck with him like a dream. When they went home, he asked his mom if he could learn violin. She told him gently, "We can't afford that, baby." But Eli didn't let go of the idea for years. He went to the public library after school and watched violin tutorials on the computer. He read books about famous violinists. He drew violin fingerboards on paper and practiced placing his fingers on the table. At age 8, an elderly neighbor who used to play violin heard about his interest and gave him an old, dusty instrument before moving to a nursing home. Eli took that violin like it was made of gold every night after finishing. His homework he practiced alone in his small room. Sometimes he couldn't play loud because of the thin apartment walls, so he learned to practice softly. Other times he played into a pillow to not disturb anyone. He played when he was happy, when he was sad, and when he felt lonely. He had never performed in public before that day in the square. He only went because he wanted to. No, was he good enough? He didn't expect money. He didn't expect applause. He only wanted to know if someone would listen. That's why he chose Paganini's Caprice No. 24. It was the hardest piece he knew. Thought, if I can play this and someone listens, maybe I really can be a violinist. Julia was stunned. She wrote the article of her life. The headline read, "The Boy Who Taught Himself to Fly Eli's Story." When the article was published, the world went from amazed to emotional. People couldn't believe how much Eli had overcome. Strangers sent letters, some sent violins. A famous violin maker offered to build a custom instrument for him, free of cost. Celebrities posted messages like, "Eli, you are an inspiration." Music schools begged his mother to let them train him, but Eli didn't say yes to anything yet. His mother asked him what he wanted. He said softly, "I just want to keep playing." Finally, a major music university offered him a chance to visit and play live for a group of professors and musicians. No pressure, no big audience, just a simple room and his violin. Eli agreed. The day came, and he stepped into the hall. He was given a new violin to try, but he asked politely if he could use his old one. It was scratched and worn, but it felt like home in his hands. He stood in front of the room. The professors looked serious. Some didn't smile. Eli took a breath, closed his eyes, and played. This time, he chose Bach's Partita No. 2 in D minor, another difficult and emotional piece. As he played, the mood in the room changed. One professor leaned forward, his mouth slightly open. Another closed her eyes and began to sway gently with the music. One man had tears running down his cheeks. When Eli finished, there was silence. Not because they were unsure, but because they were deeply moved. Then, a soft voice said, "Eli, that was more than music." Another added, "Welcome to the future." Eli had proven it again, not with words, not with a resume, but with pure feeling. That night, the video of his live performance was also shared. It confirmed to the world that Eli was not a one-time wonder. He was real. His skill was real. His heart was real. Eli became a symbol not just of musical talent, but of dedication, hope, and the power of quiet determination. Every music academy wanted him. Every TV show invited him. But through it all, he stayed the same. He still sat by the window some nights and played softly. Still wiped his violin with love. Still helped his mother carry groceries. He didn't chase fame. Fame chased him, and the world watched, knowing that they were witnessing the rise of someone truly special, a boy whose music began in silence and ended up echoing across the globe. Of course, here's part 4 explained in simple and interesting English, expanded into around 2,500 words without headings. As requested, after the world saw Eli's incredible story, everything started changing around him, but Eli himself didn't change. His calm nature, his love for music, and his quiet attitude remained the same. But the world outside his small apartment was no longer quiet. People were talking about him everywhere. Newspapers, magazines, websites, music blogs, everyone wanted to tell the story of the boy who taught himself the violin and played one of the hardest pieces in the world like it was his own language. One morning, Eli was eating breakfast with his mother in their small kitchen. She had made toast and eggs like always. But this time the radio was on, and the voice coming from it said, "The music world is still shaken after hearing 10-year-old Eli perform a Paganini piece flawlessly. Today we'll be speaking with one of the music professors who watched him live." Eli's mother paused, holding her cup of tea midair. She looked at her son. He smiled but kept eating. Outside their building, things had changed too. Their neighbors, who had never really noticed them before, now greeted them warmly. Some of them said things like, "We're proud of you, Eli," or "Keep going, little maestro." The same people who used to complain about hearing violin sounds at night now looked at him with admiration. Eli would just nod politely and keep walking, but not everything was easy. With attention came pressure. Eli's mother started receiving calls and letters every day. People offered him contracts, performances, interviews, and even movie deals. Some wanted to feature him in ads. One company offered money for him to just hold their product in a photo. His mother was overwhelmed. She worked so hard to give him a quiet and stable life, and now the world wanted to pull him in 100 directions. One night, After dinner, she sat with Eli and asked, "Are you happy, baby?" Eli looked up from tuning his violin and said, "I'm happiest when I'm playing. Everything else feels ... loud." That answer helped her decide. She spoke with a lawyer and a small group of people she trusted to help her manage everything. She made it clear Eli was a child first, who'd go to school, eat home-cooked food, and play in the park like other kids. Yes, he could travel for music, but only if he wanted to. No one was going to take his peace away, not fame. Not money, not the media. Still, exciting things started happening. He was invited to perform at a special event for young musicians in Europe. It wasn't a competition, it's just a gathering of talented young players from around the world. It would be his first time traveling outside the country. He was nervous. His mother packed his clothes, carefully wrapped his violin, held his hand at the airport. When they reached the concert hall in Vienna, it felt like a dream. The building was massive, with golden walls, tall ceilings, and paintings of old composers everywhere. Eli stood quietly, holding his violin, surrounded by kids from countries he had never even heard of. Some of them had personal coaches, others came from famous music schools. They were dressed in expensive suits and gowns. Eli wore his usual black pants and white shirt. Some kids looked at him like he didn't belong. One boy from a rich music academy whispered to his friend, "He's the one from the internet, right? I bet it was fake." Eli heard them, but didn't say anything. That evening, everyone was given time to rehearse. When Eli's turn came, he walked onto the stage and stood under the soft lights. The judges sat silently. He looked at them, nodded, and started playing a Hungarian rhapsody. It was a fiery, energetic piece, full of fast movements and deep emotion. As soon as his bow touched the strings, the whole room changed. The sound came alive. It danced, soared, and whispered. His fingers moved like lightning. But more than that, his music had something that no one else's did. It had honesty. It had a soul. The judges sat straighter. One of them put his pen down and just listened. When Eli finished, the room was silent for a moment, then filled with strong applause. Afterward, even the kids who had doubted him came up and said, "That was amazing." One girl from Japan said, "Your playing made me cry a little." Eli smiled and said thank you. That night, Eli and his mother sat on a hotel balcony. She asked him, how did it feel? He looked at the stars and said, "It felt like the violin was talking for me." After returning home, more offers came in. One very big one came from an orchestra in London. They wanted Eli to perform with them at the Royal Albert Hall. It was one of the most famous music stages in the world. Many violinists wait their whole lives for a chance to play there. Eli didn't know what to say at first. Felt too big, too soon. But then he thought about it and asked his mother, "Can I play a piece that means something to me?" She said, "Of course, baby. This is your journey." He chose to perform a piece he had written himself. It was a soft, slow melody, with moments of sadness but also hope. It didn't have a name at first. He just called it My Song. When he played it at the Royal Albert Hall, the crowd listened in silence. Even the conductor wiped a tear from his eye. After the performance, the audience stood up and clapped for a full 5 minutes. People from the back rows shouted his name. Some cried. Some simply stood with their hands on their hearts. After the show, a reporter asked him, "What's the name of that piece?" Eli thought for a moment and said, "I think it's called For Mama." The audience watching on TV melted. Video of that performance became even more popular than his first one. It showed not just his talent, but his love, his simplicity, and his pure heart. Back home, Eli's old violin finally broke. The wood had worn out after so many years. His mother was sad, but Eli wasn't. He held the violin close one last time and said, "Thank you for everything." He placed it in a special wooden box, and his mother kept it in their living room. A famous violin maker, who had already offered him a custom instrument, now delivered it personally. It was made from rare wood and had delicate carvings. When Eli played it for the first time, he smiled. "It sounds like a new story," he said. Eli now had the best teachers from around the world. but none of them tried to change who he was. They taught him techniques and helped him with theory. They all agreed Eli's greatest strength was not something you could teach. It was something that came from inside him, natural connection to music. Despite his rising fame, Eli stayed humble. He visited schools and taught other kids what he had learned. He told them, "You don't need fancy things to love music. You just need patience and heart." He even returned to the street where he first performed and played there again, this time with hundreds of people watching and clapping. But even with all the love and success, there were still challenges. Sometimes people tried to control his career. Some music companies offered contracts that looked good at first, but had hidden problems. They wanted to use his image for money. Eli's mother rejected all of them. She protected his freedom like a lioness. She said, "He's not a product. He's my son." And she was right, because Eli didn't belong to the business of fame. He belonged to music. Once, during an interview, a journalist asked him, "Do you want to be the best violinist in the world?" Eli thought deeply and said, "No, I want to be the truest." That answer became famous. It was printed on posters, shared online, and even quoted by other musicians. Eli started writing more music. Some of it was happy, some was quiet, and some made people cry. Every piece told a story about hope, about struggle, about beauty hidden in simple things. Damned didn't write for awards. He wrote because it made him feel whole. He was invited to music festivals, royal events, and charity concerts. But one day, he asked his mom, "Can we go visit Grandpa's village?" His mother was surprised, but she agreed. They packed there. Things in took a long bus ride to a quiet village where his grandfather had once lived. There, Eli sat under a big tree and played for cows, birds, and a few old villagers. He smiled the whole time. This, he said, is where the music started, in the quiet. Eli's story was no longer just about a child with talent. It was about something bigger. It was about staying kind in a loud world. It's about trusting your gift, about never letting go of the things that make you who you are. As he walked through the fields with his violin case in hand, someone asked him, "What's next for you?" He smiled and said, "I don't know, but I'll keep listening to the music inside me." And that was enough, because wherever Eli went, the world listened too. Of course. Here's part 5, explained in simple and interesting English, written in an emotional and engaging tone, expanded into around 2,500 words as you requested. Months passed, and Eli's name continued to echo in the hearts of people everywhere. What started with a small boy playing the violin on the streets had now grown into something far bigger than anyone had imagined. But even with all the attention, the awards, and the fame, Eli remained the same quiet, gentle soul who just loved the sound of music. He had been invited to many places, music halls, festivals, interviews, but he never let it get to his head. Some people wanted him to live in big cities, perform nonstop, and chase after every opportunity, but Eli chose carefully. He always asked one question before saying yes to anything. Will it make me feel something? One day a letter arrived. At their home, it wasn't fancy. It's no logos, no glitter, no gold stamp. It's just a simple white envelope with careful handwriting. His mother opened it and began reading out loud. "Dear Eli, I am the music teacher of a school in a small town where most children have never even seen a violin. We have no music class. We have no instruments. But after watching your video online, the children keep asking me what music sounds like in real life. We don't have much, but if you ever find time, we would love to see you, even just once." She looked up at Eli after reading it. His eyes sparkled. A week later, they took a long, dusty road trip to the small town. There were no hotels, no cameras, no reporters. Just little kids running around barefoot and shy parents standing in doorways. When they reached the school, it was just 4 rooms with cracked walls. But when Eli stepped out of the car holding his violin case, every child's face lit up. Some didn't know what a violin was. Others had only seen it in cartoons. But they gathered in a circle as Eli opened the case, took out his instrument, and gently began to play. He started with a slow, soft tune, the kind of music that made trees feel like they were swaying. The children sat silently, their eyes wide. Even the birds nearby seemed to pause. Then Eli switched to a happy piece full of joy and jumping notes. The children clapped in rhythm. Some even got up and started dancing. After the small concert, Eli let the kids come forward and touch the violin. He showed them how to hold it, how to move the bow. One boy asked, "Can it sing like a bird?" Eli smiled and played a melody that sounded just like one. The boy giggled. A girl said, "Can it cry?" And Eli played a sad tune, so full of emotion that even a teacher had to wipe her eyes. Eli spent the whole day there, teaching, playing, listening. And when he left, the kids followed him to the edge of the village, waving goodbye and humming the songs he had played. On the way back, Eli looked out of the window and said to his mother, "That was my favorite concert." And that became something new for him, traveling to forgotten places, places where music didn't live yet. He didn't go to show off. He went to share, to give. He became known not just as a musical genius, but as someone who reminded people what music was really about. Meanwhile, back in the big cities, the music world was changing too. Young people everywhere were inspired by Eli's story. Some started learning instruments. Others wrote songs. Music schools created scholarships in his name. And something special happened. Two people stopped caring only about perfection and started caring about feeling. Eli had unknowingly started a quiet revolution. Years passed and Eli grew. He was no longer that tiny boy with nervous fingers and wild curls. He was a teenager now, taller, still soft-spoken but more confident. His style had matured. He could now compose entire pieces that moved from sadness to celebration, from stormy pain to peaceful calm, but something deep inside him had not changed. At all, he still played for his own heart first. One rainy evening, as Eli was practicing at home, his mother entered his room. She was holding a letter. "This one is different," she said. The letter was from the International Peace Forum. Every year, they held a global gathering to honor people who had made the world better, not just through power or money, but through kindness, impact, and inspiration. They invited leaders, doctors, inventors, and now they were inviting Eli to perform for the closing ceremony in front of leaders from 150 countries. Eli didn't say anything for a while. Then he asked, "Can I play something new?" Spent the next few weeks creating a special piece. He wrote it in the quiet of the night, with the window open, listening to the wind, the city, and the memory of his younger self. He poured everything into it. The sound of empty streets, the feeling of people believing in him, the laughter of the children in the small school, the protection of his mother, and the deep silence that lives inside a song before it begins. When the day finally came, Eli stood backstage. He looked out at the huge audience. Presidents, scientists, artists, teachers, students, they were all waiting. He walked onto the stage slowly, wearing a simple black suit. He didn't wave, he didn't smile, just bowed slightly and picked up his violin. Then he closed his eyes and began. The piece started quietly, like a heartbeat. Slowly it grew, like something waking up. There were soft waves of sound rising and falling like memories. Then came a sharp pain notes that cried like a lost child. But after the pain came hope. The notes began to lift, to rise, to shine. The final part was full of courage. It ended with a gentle whisper as if saying, "We're still here." The room was silent when he finished, not because they didn't like it, but because no one wanted the moment to end. Then slowly the applause began. First one person, then two, then everyone. They stood, they clapped, some cried, some closed their eyes, holding on to the feeling just a little longer. Later, someone asked Eli, "What's the name of the piece?" He said softly, "I don't know yet. Maybe you can name it. It's after how it made you feel." And that was Eli. Always letting the music speak more than the words ever could. He returned home and lived quietly for a while. He still played, still wrote music, but he avoided interviews, avoided bright lights. Not because he was hiding, but because he was thinking. He was now old enough to understand the world more deeply. He He saw how fame could lift someone up, also break them. He saw young artists burn out. He saw people use music to compete, to judge, to show off. And it made him sad. One evening, as he sat by the river, he spoke to his mother. "I want to build a place," he said. "A place where kids can come to learn music, not just with their hands, but with their hearts. A school, but not a normal one. No pressure, no grades. Just freedom to feel and create." His mother smiled. "Then we'll build it." And they did. With the help of donations, friends, and people he had inspired all over the world, Eli opened the little violin school. It wasn't big. It's just a few rooms, a garden, and a stage under the open sky. Children from different backgrounds came. Some couldn't afford instruments. Others had disabilities. Some didn't speak much. But all of them had one thing in common. They had something to say through music Eli taught them. Not with long lectures, but with stories, games, and silence too. He taught them to listen to each other, to the wind, to their own breath. He told them, mistakes are part of music. Don't fear them. And one evening, many years later, a small boy with wild curls stood on the same street corner where Eli had once played. He held a little violin. A few people gathered around. He began to play. The music was soft. Not perfect, but honest, quiet. Man in the crowd smiled, pulled his hat down gently to hide his tears, and walked away, because he knew the music had returned to where it all began, and it would never stop.